All right, so even though we could be celebrating positive interest rate, I mean, having a reduction in inflation, that could lead to a reduction in interest rate, could lead to a reduction in FPIs, as foreign portfolio investment. But we'll see what happens in the coming days. Now, one of the reasons, according to Governor Olaimika Doso, why the MPC chose a hold stand, is because there's been stability in the price of petroleum products, which we know energy, transportation are major contributors to inflation number in Nigeria and other parts of the world. So let's find out if we are really in a safe place when we talk about the pricing and supply of petroleum products in Nigeria. We have energy experts right here in the studio, Dr. Wisdom Enang. Dr. Enang, good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon, Nini. Thank you very much.
So I won't take you through the MPC. I know you are oil and gas man, but I mean, one of the reasons why the meeting say they took the stance that they're taking was there's been a bit of stability in the oil and gas sector. We've seen the price of diesel, taper a bit. Yeah. Then we've also seen petrol after the Christmas gifts, and then the competition factor driving Correct. In. So would you say we're at a stable place now in the oil and gas sector in the country?
Yeah, definitely. I think we are in a stable position, but more so the outlook for the future is looking really good. And what do I mean by that? What are the factors that affect the outlook? The first is as it affects PMS, for example, and other refined products. The first is the crude oil prices. And we know that with the rumored discussion of peace treaty between Russia and Ukraine, we can be assured that that would lift some of the sanctions already existing with Russia. If that comes through, would have a lot more liquidity globally, and then that means the prices will definitely come down.
Isn't that a negative for us?
Well, that's why I said it's a positive for the downstream sector, but a negative for our upstream earnings. So that's why I was very specific that it's good for consumers, basically. Now, the other thing is that we look at our exchange rate. That's another big factor. Exchange rate, for the first time we're seeing the power market really come down really hard. I think today I'm hearing about 1,520, which is really good. Considering the fact that it was quite high up a couple of weeks ago. So that's to show that the central bank decisions are really helpful. And as that comes down, also coupled with the fact that we're having, for example, the Dangote refinery go up in terms of the economies of scale. As you ramp up your production now at about 550,000 barrels, producing daily production of about 33,000 liters, 33 million liters, per day. That means that we are in a very good position, and the outlook is quite good. But then, for me, I'm just thinking to myself, what's the value in the import licenses at the moment? Are they for price check, or are they because we need them? And if you work them out, the NMDPRS said that we currently do consume about 50 million liters of PMS daily, and the Dangote refinery is already giving about 33 million. And then, of course, just today we had an update that we have, about 10 days worth of production from the Dangote refinery that has not been, circulated in the market. So the question is, where are we headed ultimately? Are we going to be benchmarking the price domestically using that of the, the imported variant, or is there a real need for importation into the country to meet any shortfall?
Yeah, well, I was hoping you would say that. You've heard that with time, the issue of importing refined products will come to an end, because I think that's the hope of Nigerians.
Yeah, hypothetically with time. But if you read that, if you say that, and then you look at the rhetoric from the NMDPRA, there is a strong indication from them that there's need to import for a shortfall. The discussion from the NMDPRA leadership shows that they envisage that the domestic refining capacity can only meet about less than 50% of our production of our needs,
demand.
of our demand. However, the Dangote refinery has also said more recently that they have about 10 days worth of production that hasn't been lifted. So they're questioning the real intent. And this is why I said, is the intent ultimately for those import licenses to be kept as a price benchmark, or is there a real need for us to import the those imported variants into the country to meet a shortfall?
I actually thought we're done with all of this politicking, and sentiments around all of this. But I guess, as you noted, perhaps it's a strategy to avoid monopoly.
Correct.
But the consumer wants to know, then what does it cost me? We're supposed to have the Port Harcourt refinery working, the Warri refinery working. There are others, I think Kaduna is supposed to come on stream and all of that. Are we going to have all of that and still keep importing into the country?
That's the big question for the future, because if you look at what happened in January, we had the Dangote refinery increase the ex-depot price from 899.50 naira to about 955, and then you had retailers go from 935 to about 970 at the time. But then you had the importers benchmarking theirs at about 922 naira, saying that they were ready to supply at 922. There was a bit of a conversation around whether the importers were happy to still stick with the Dangote, even though it was 955. And then suddenly on February 1, we had a press release from the Dangote reversing the prices and making it lower. And I think that brought down the prices. Right now, we're having MRS, they're doing at about 925. We have the NMPC, for example, now doing at about 945. And then other people are selling at about 960, 970, 980, depending on where you go. So it looks to me that there is a sort of a subtle competition going on between the import variant and the domestically produced variant. More importantly, I'm thinking in my mind, how are we going to get to a point where even the domestically produced crude, PMS, the benefits of that reduced pricing gets to everybody? Because right now the real benefits are demonstrated by MRS. If you go to an MRS filling station, you will get 925. But if you go to anywhere else other than that, you might get 960, 970. So how do we even make sure that there is that sort of uniformity in the price benefits, especially considering that quite a number of people are lifting from the Dangote refinery?
Yeah, but do we need price uniformity? Shouldn't the consumer benefit when there's that competition? Well, and it's a deregulated market. It's a
deregulated market. But what I'm saying is, you've obviously taken from one source, right? And that's the source that is producing majorly for the country. And then I'm asking, how do we ensure that when you take from that source, the margins you put on there are in line with the agreement? Remember, the Dangote refinery, for example, has signed a deal with MRS to say this is the kind of prices we want, and that's to make sure that those benefits are passed down, essentially to stop the situation where we have the benefits given from the manufacturer, for example, or producer, down to the middleman, and the middlemen then inflate that whole margin, and then the consumers don't have the benefit. So not like we should regulate the market, but to make sure that those benefits, which of course as a result of the fact that the crude for naira deal that we're having at the moment, more stable macro conditions, passing that on to Nigerians and making sure that those benefits stay realistically with Nigerians.
I guess consumers will have to make the choice. You stay on the queue at FRS. But I mean, there's also something brewing in the global scene. Russia, Ukraine. We know the disruption that brought when that war started.
Correct.
And now we're hearing peace talks. At first, it seemed President Zelensky was not so, into it. But now, at least from last night, I believe he said he had positive conversation with envoy from the United States. And so if sanctions are lifted off Russia oil comes back full stream, so while the consumer will be smiling, the government, our budget funding may be threatened.
Correct, and that's true. And just to further compound the problem that you're trying to contextualize, let's look at if we now have the full effect of the United States drill baby drill, and that's going to further compound the problem. So that's why I said that it's an opportunity cost, either which way. if you look at the fact that the government is obviously at this time, for the crude for naira deal to work, there is some opportunity cost. The government is having to go take out some of the quota that it should have made earnings from for the domestic refinery, and that would even be worsened when the crude oil prices go low. Now, what's the solution? I think the government is cognizant of that, which is why you keep hearing that we are gearing towards making 2 million barrels per day before the year runs out. At the moment, we are at about 1.538 million barrels per day, which is why the headline came out that we actually beat our OPEC quota by about 38,000 barrels per day. So that's a good positive note. It's good to know that the government is cognizant of this, and we can tell this because there's a lot of drive towards, if you've gotten the licenses, you've got to start operationalizing those licenses to get some benefits into the economy. There's also a lot of talks about bringing the key critical stakeholders at the various states where there are problems. For example, they're going to lead us to say, let's have a conversation about how we can work to end all sorts of crude oil theft. And now we're having promising numbers. We're having numbers like 5,000 barrels per day level of theft, which used to be much higher. So now we're rejoicing that the theft has gone to about 5,000 barrels per day. So there is a positive note that ultimately the government is, though reactive, right, but it's reacting quick enough to make sure that whatever happens, we're not going to take that much of a hit. As to how we're going to fund any shortfall, because we've got estimates in our budgets, we estimated the exchange rate at a certain price, 1,500, and then the cost of crude at a certain price. But ultimately, the government would have to work out two ways. Either they have to borrow, or either they have to work smartly to spend for each of the projects, realize it, but then spend less. It's left for the government, but that possibility is beginning to crystallize very quickly.
Yeah, but I hear you say that the solution is just ramp up our crude production.
Yeah, if possible. I mean, looking at all the militating factors, there has been a number of militating factors, right? And I'm glad to say that the current government has really done well when it comes to getting through the whole issue of divestments, because what people don't realize, in the years heading towards the actual pronouncement of an intent to divest, most of those companies psychologically have divested. Yeah, so say 3 years before then, they begin to slow down on the investments. They're thinking about how to just recover the oil, make a lot of money from it, and then move on. Right, and I think the government hastening that process is really crucial, because it means other companies that have other thoughts about how to optimize the production portfolios that they have in country here, cognizant of the fact that they do not have alternatives to look at globally like the other oil majors would do. That's a good one. The second thing is that we need to diversify our earnings portfolio, and it's good when you see companies like Seplat, for example, take over the mobile producing Nigeria, which is because they're actually geared towards optimizing gas portfolios. So you begin to see the potential for gas to be a very major earner for Nigeria. So that's a good thing, and I think it's very strategic. More so, I think recently we've had the rhetoric change from signature bonus to more of, put that money into production, and then we'll earn it at the back of the production that you make.
But I guess the other diversification would come the non-oil exports.
Correct.
We could also do a whole lot with that, and that could also boost the government's revenue. And
that speaks to establishing primary, secondary, and tertiary linkages to the oil sector. For example, think about what we can do with gas. We can do a lot of, we can boost the power sector. We can do a lot of manufacturing of urea, for example, which then fits into agriculture. So there are a number of things that we could do. And potentially, I mean, when you look at what gas can do, it's a huge, I mean, we're even talking about CNG. We're talking about, the transition fuel. We're even talking about supporting some of our manufacturing capabilities. So those are all things that, of course, we need to start looking at. Again, it's good that we've attained stability in the oil sector. Now the non-oil, we need to take it one step at a time from the primary to secondary and then tertiary linkages we need to start establishing.
All right, I hear you, linkages. It's just the oil and gas has to stay in the middle of it. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Wisdom Enang, for your time.
Thank you very much. Deeply appreciate it.